Hello, Thrivers. Today I'm talking about complex PTSD and the abandoned self. Okay, in Pete Walker's book entitled CPTSD From Surviving to Thriving, he talks about 5 of the main components of complex PTSD, and one of them is self-abandonment. Now, the reality is that if we don't heal self-abandonment, then we continue with unhealed CPTSD, and our inner wounds and our inner child can show up in our present life and make decisions that aren't always the best for us. Okay? Also, self-abandonment keeps you from feeling whole as you are. And so you're constantly seeking love outside of self and value outside of self. So you're dependent on something outside of self to feel good, and that's not very empowering. So today I want to talk about 7 things that reveal if you are abandoning yourself. And honestly, that's the first step in change, is recognizing it. The truth is that if somebody had asked me years ago, Michelle, do you abandon yourself? Are you self-abandoning? I don't think I really understood what that meant. And I don't think I realized the ways that I really was doing that. So it's really not until it's in our conscious awareness that we can change it. With that in mind, let's get started. For those that don't know me, my name is Michele. I'm a life and relationship coach. I'm also the founder of the Thriver School of Transformation, which is a monthly membership, an interactive monthly membership where we get together weekly and we talk about everything that I discuss on this channel. We do this together and we find ways to put the tips and the tools into practice in our daily life. So if you feel like you can benefit from weekly support, make sure you check out the link in the description box below. Okay, so let's get into those 7 ways and evaluate. Evaluate yourself and how many you may be engaging in without even realizing it. So let's dive in. Number 1. One way that we self-abandon is by harshly judging ourselves. Okay, think about how alone and scared and rejected you felt if you had either a parent, a caregiver, a bully in school, or a significant other that constantly was criticizing you, pointing out your flaws, making you feel stupid, ugly, not enough, embarrassing, right? Think about how that felt in the past. Well, the reality is that if you pay attention to your inner dialogue and you find yourself saying those same things that somebody else said to you, you're actually abandoning yourself when you do that. Part of healing is changing your inner dialogue, and that takes work. It takes patience, it takes time, and it takes effort. But in order to stop abandoning ourselves, we have to change how we think. Number 2 is ignoring your feelings. Now, sometimes we can do this very covertly. We don't think we're ignoring our feelings. We just like to be busy. And we're doing and doing and doing. And we're never pausing and we're never reflecting inside. In fact, if we really paid attention to what was going on inside, we would notice that whenever an uncomfortable emotion comes up in our body, to avoid it, we make ourselves busy. But the reality is that more often than not, we are imitating a parent that was too busy for us in our childhood. So let's say your parent was just busy, busy, busy and never had time for you. Well, that was emotionally abandoning for you. And if you analyze it, do you never have time for you now? Have you internalized that? Number 3 is seeking others to heal the abandonment. So even if your past and your childhood was a long time ago, reality is that if the wounds from the past weren't healed, they can be present in our body as if they just happened yesterday. So if you were abandoned in childhood, a child doesn't have the ability to help themselves when they feel emotionally abandoned. They don't have the ability or the emotional intelligence to be able to be there for themselves, nor should they have to do that, right? Well, if your caregiver never gave it to you, you still have that need. You still have emotional needs that are being unmet, even from that far back. And if you aren't giving them to you, In other words, you're abandoning yourself. Your inner child's going to show up and it's going to seek other people to heal those unmet needs. Now, the problem with that is that it's coming from that unhealed space inside, right? Your unhealed inner child. And your unhealed inner child is going to be drawn to people that resemble the caregiver that caused the wounds in the first place, because its desire is to heal the wound. And so it's going to be attracted to familiarity. All right, it doesn't mean that that person is good for you. It means that it's familiar, and your inner child is going to be drawn to that. And if you don't recognize this, then you run the risk of repeating relationships, unhealthy and toxic relationships in your adult life. And another part of this is the fact that when your inner child is showing up to get its needs met outside of self, we can get kind of manipulative, okay? We can either be very controlling because we think we need to control the situation. If we can control it, then we won't be abandoned. Or we become overly complacent and we are overly pacifying and being so nice, and we're doing everything because if we are so nice, we won't be abandoned. Okay, but either way, we're not really being our authentic self. That unhealed piece of you is coming on and it's making decisions in your present life. Number 4 is addictions. Addictions are a way of self-abandoning, okay? Oftentimes, I've heard it with my face-to-face clients. They'll tell me, Michele, you know, every time I'm about to get a drink, I realize now that I'm paying attention to what's going on inside, I realize that an emotion comes up, a pain comes up, and I don't want to feel it, so I go towards the addiction. Whether it's drinking, whether it's binge watching on TV, whether it's shopping, it's always something that has you focused on something other than what's going on inside. Or in the case of alcohol, it's something that you think will numb and cause you to not feel what's going on inside. But again, you are emotionally abandoning yourself every time you ignore those feelings that are coming up in our body. Now, they're not fun feelings, and no one enjoys having them come up, but they are the only way to resolve the past and process and release it. The 5th way we can, at times, self-abandon ourselves is by being stuck in our head and stuck in the story. In other words, we analyze everything. So let's say we have narcissistic family members. We're constantly thinking, well, she did this and he did that, and why did they do this? And then they said this, and what if they do this? And our whole thought process is on trying to figure out why they did what they did or what they're going to do in the future. Now, there is a part of healing where we do have to take time to understand, right? We have to understand what happened in order to move forward. But if we get stuck in that, and that's all we're doing, and the years are going by, and our main focus is on them and what they did and why they did it, and analyzing every circumstance or every encounter we have with them, we're up in our head and we're not in our body. And our feelings aren't felt logically. They're not felt with the logical parts of our mind. They're felt in our body. So if we don't want to abandon ourselves, we have to start paying attention not to what or why they did what they did or said what they said, but what's coming up in our body and why. Kind of bleeds into the 6th one, where we can get stuck focused on the abuser. Okay, we're so focused on the stories, and there's so many forums that are out there that are designed to keep you stuck in your story, and you're repeating the story and you're hearing other people's story, and it's story after story after story. The problem is to an extent, in the beginning, that's very necessary. I'm not trying to minimize that step, but it is just a step on the healing journey. It's not a destination. But I find that people get stuck in that as if it's a destination, and that keeps them from looking at inside and finding out what's going on. And it's literally a form of self-abandonment. And the last way we abandon ourselves is when we try to get others to change so that we feel better. Okay, now think about this, Okay, there was a time where I don't know if I could have simulated that in my head, that that's what I was doing. But looking back, I could see how often I did that. So in other words, let's say I didn't want to feel something. Let's say I want to feel happy instead of depressed. And I would try to do everything to make the other person happy and not say anything that would make me feel bad about myself, right? So I'm trying to control them so I feel something. Think about that for a second. If we think, if I can just stop him or her from acting like this, then I can feel that, then we are literally abandoning ourselves as if we are not able to show up for ourselves. And, you know, the reality is that people are going to be who they are, and we can't control them. We have to let go of how others choose to be, even if we don't like it, right? I'm not saying that we like how they act, but I am saying that we have to let go of trying to get them to change so that we feel better. When the reality is we have to start teaching our brain to look at things like they're allowed to be their nasty self. You know, I don't like it. It's not fun. I don't enjoy being around them, but they're allowed to be that way if that's who they choose to be. I'm still allowed to feel happy. I'm still allowed to be excited. I'm still allowed to be funny if that's what I want to be. I'm still allowed to be silly. In other words, you don't need to change anyone to give yourself permission to feel what you're feeling. Okay, so those are 7 ways that we tend to abandon ourselves. They all come from the fact that somebody treated you that way, and therefore it somehow got internalized, you know, under your conscious awareness. It got internalized. It got put into your subconscious. But the good news is that you can bring it into your conscious awareness, and you can, thanks to neuroplasticity, you can change it. You can upgrade your way of treating yourself, your belief systems, and that will change your life.